Welcome to the Texas Talks podcast. I'm your host, Brad Swale. Today, I'm joined with Ray Martinez. He's the president and CEO of the Texas Association of Community Colleges, providing leadership to advance state policy, institutional practices, and research in support of Texas community colleges. Ray, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Brad. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to speak with you. I did take some community college courses in my, higher education journey.
Sure.
Thinking back on it, I think that I wish I had taken more.
Mhm.
And, even to this day, I think there's got to be a good community college class out there to take. So I'm excited to talk to you.
Great.
Um, I gave a very brief intro about who you are. I mean, it could scarcely be more brief. Would you like to add to that some?
Happy to, just briefly talk a little bit about my sort of background and maybe
Sure.
journey in post-secondary. I'm a first generation college graduate myself, and my grew up in Alice, Texas, which is a one high school town of about 20,000 people down in South Texas, about 45 miles west of Corpus Christi. My parents were of sort of the World War II generation where my dad made it through the seventh grade and began working, and that was the extent of his formal education. My mother made it through the 11th grade before she too went and started working to support her family, and then they moved on from there, and they had me and my older sister as they got married and started their family. So for me, it was certainly the emphasis from particularly my parents and sort of our extended family was the importance of education and the doors that further education could open. So to me, and my father was a car mechanic. He was an auto mechanic pretty much all of his life, and that's what he did to support our family. My mother stayed home to raise me and my older sister. But again, the emphasis was upon education and the promise that getting an education, a high school diploma first and foremost, but an emphasis, at least in my family and my extended family, upon the importance of an education beyond just a high school diploma. And so that's what I heard as I was growing up, and I was glad to be able to take that messaging and move on to college after I graduated from high school in the early 1980s. I went to a small liberal arts college in Georgetown, Texas. Southwestern University is where I got my undergraduate degree, bachelor's degree. And then I took 4 years off between my graduating from Southwestern with a bachelor's degree and starting law school, in part because I had to borrow some money to get through Southwestern and complete my undergraduate degree. So I wanted to work for a little bit before I began law school. And so it was I think it was in the spring of 1991 is when I actually started law school at the University of Houston Law Center, and eventually worked my way toward my JD. And I've been licensed as an attorney here in Texas for over 20 years now. So, I mean, again, like so many others, who grow up like I did, working class family, perhaps first generation college students or college graduates as well. I look back on the messaging from my family, from my parents, as in many ways a blessing that I was able to be able to take that messaging that I heard, translate it into some action, go into college, eventually go to law school, and now for the last almost 17, 18 years working in the higher education space in various capacities. Most recently, in what I'm doing today, which is why I'm so proud to talk to you, is to work on behalf of our 50 community colleges across the state of Texas. So hopefully that is helpful, Brad, to give you a little bit of a snapshot as to what my journey has looked like.
Yeah, no, I love to get a little bit of personal background from guests to kind of, get a feel for where they're coming from and their history and sort of why they do what they do. I mean, I kind of have to ask it, you went to universities, right?
Mhm.
Even back then, I mean, student debt is such a big issue nowadays. And community colleges are, and we'll talk more about this later in the show, I think, but community colleges are often seen as a way to sort of get an education, jumpstart your education without having to go into so much debt. And I'm wondering, you went to Southwestern back in the 80s,
Yeah.
then you took a little break to pay off some of that debt.
Mhm.
If community were, I'm certainly there was community colleges back then. Were they not? I mean, looking back on it now with what you know, would you have done more community college to sort of avoid that debt, or was it really not that big a deal back then?
No, it was a big deal, and I would have done so. I mean, for my hometown of Alice, there's not an actual sort of campus community college in my hometown. Coastal Bend College, back then it was called B County College, actually. It's in Beeville. So it's a bit of a drive from my hometown. They did have sort of an extension center in Alice, so I knew about the community college. Again, now it's called Coastal Bend College. So it was certainly an option for me, and it's
Yeah.
something that I certainly also considered because I did not have financial means. What worked for me to end up at a school like Southwestern was because I was able to piece together grants that came in from the Pell Grant. I was a Pell Grant recipient. Here in Texas, we have an equivalent to a Pell Grant, which is a need-based financial aid program. Three different ones, as a matter of fact. One for students that choose a community college. It's called TEOG. One for students that choose to attend a public university in Texas. That's called Texas Grants. And there's a separate program, again, need-based. So you have to demonstrate financial need, but there's a separate financial aid program called Texas Equalization Grant, or TEG, that is for students who choose to go to a private independent college like Southwestern.
Yeah.
And because of that, because I demonstrated financial need, I was able to piece together Pell Grants, TEG grants, but that was not enough. I still had to borrow, so I had to take out some student loans to get through Southwestern. So community college would have definitely, it was something I considered, but I was able to piece it enough together because my parents really couldn't contribute anything. They just didn't have the means to contribute financially
Yeah.
to my college degree or even law school, quite frankly. They contributed a lot, a substantial. They gave me the will, if you will, and the
Yeah.
mindset to go and complete those degrees. But they really were not in a position to contribute financially. So you're right. Community college, increasingly so, is an option for students who perhaps want to get years 1 and 2 under their belt, complete their core curriculum, and then transfer to a 4-year university. It's an outstanding way to do that and not go into a lot of debt, because community colleges in Texas, we'll probably talk about this in more detail later, we are among the most affordable community colleges in the country. And that's not us saying that, that's third parties that look at tuition and fees across the nation for 2-year public colleges, community colleges, in other words. And Texas is usually on the list as one of the 5 or 6 most affordable in the country in terms of tuition and fees for our 50 community colleges. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
great
I,
option.
I mean, I always looked at them as affordable. I didn't know that we were that affordable.
We
Uh,
are.
so we talked a little bit about you. So you're the president and CEO of the Texas Association of Community Colleges. What exactly does the TACC do?
Yeah. Well, the TACC, as we refer to it, is a nonprofit association. It's been around since 1947, actually, as an association, and it was formed so that the community colleges in Texas, we don't have a system office for community colleges, and some states do. California has a chancellor for all of their community colleges that's a system chancellor that oversees, sort of is the voice and the face of and the advocate for policy and funding priorities for their 100 plus community colleges across the state of California. Here in Texas, we don't do it that way. We don't have a system office that represents all 50. Rather, 50 community colleges operate independently, and yet they have seen for decades now, since the formation of TAC, the value in being able to support an association that is able to articulate and be the voice and the face of our sector, of our 50 community colleges, particularly when it comes to legislative priorities. And by that, I mean policy that impacts our community colleges across Texas, funding needs of our community colleges. And again, I know we'll get into more detail about the different funding mechanisms for our community colleges, but state funding is a key part of the overall funding that is provided to our community colleges. So having an association that can speak on behalf of the sector has been important for community colleges for decades now. So that's the focus of what we do. TAC is an umbrella organization that also encompasses an association representing our trustees and regents across the state that govern our community colleges. So all 50 community colleges have an elected governing board. The size of the governing board varies from college to college, usually 7 or 9 elected officials
Yep.
that get elected to be trustees. Of our colleges call their governing board members regents. So either a trustee or regent that is elected to a 4-year term or something like that, and they then provide the governance oversight of the community colleges. So within TAC, we have an association that is part of our association that helps to get the perspective and information out to our governing board members. So those trustees and regents across the state. Overall, there's something like 425, 430 elected regents or trustees and regents that govern our community colleges across the state. So it's TAC as the umbrella organization, our trustees association, and then one other entity that exists again within TAC is what we call our Texas Success Center. And our Texas Success Center has been around for a little over a decade. And what we do here is work directly with practitioners. So we have folks that help to put strategies, policies in place that help to improve student success. So what we don't want to happen is for students to enroll in a community college and swirl around, not knowing exactly what they want to do, and accumulate college credits that may or may not actually mean something toward a credential down the road.
Yeah.
We want It's okay for students to come in not knowing what they want to do. That's pretty standard. I've got 2 kids in college right now. Both of them are still trying to find their way, quite frankly, through their experience. That's okay. But even in that regard, we don't want students to just pay money and collect college credits that ultimately may not mean something toward the credential that they want to obtain or decide to obtain. So our Student Success Center works with college academic advisors, with various coaches on campuses, with faculty members, and with our administrators to put what are called guided pathways in place to make sure that we light the runway for whatever path is chosen by a student. It may be a workforce education credential, it may be an academic credential. We want to light up that pathway for them so that they know here are the courses that you need to take to be able to achieve that particular credential. That's part of the work that we do here at the association as well. So it's a lot of information about TAC, but it's an important piece of supporting our 50 community colleges and ensuring that we stay focused squarely on student success, which is what our colleges are all about.
Yeah. I probably spent the first 2 years of my university taking classes I probably shouldn't, probably didn't need to take. So
Yeah,
I know how
swirling
that,
around, huh?
yeah. So, what role do community colleges play here here in Texas educating students, versus 4-year universities or, I guess whatever other options there might be. Some people
Yeah,
don't go, but
yeah.
what's the role of community colleges?
Yeah, so I think the first place to start with that is maybe, we are proudly open enrollment institutions. Anybody that wants to enroll in a community college, whether it is to, it could be a parent like me that wants to take a quick course to understand, social media so that we can better communicate with our own kids. And
You speaking
that's
from
possible.
experience, did you do that?
I'm telling you that there could be a little bit of that in there. Or it could be somebody who's already employed, let's say in the petrochemical industry down in my hometown area of Corpus Christi, that is already gainfully employed, that wants to achieve a short-term credential to upskill or reskill to be able to move up the ladder with what they're doing currently in their employment, right? So there are those possibilities. And then, of course, we also still, the majority of students that enroll at a community college in Texas, and this is true across the nation as well, are students who aspire to transfer to a 4-year university, but they want to get their core curriculum, their core courses done through a community college, in part for cost and affordability, but it also just may be that life circumstances require that they stay close to home and enroll at a community college with the aspiration that after 1 or 2 years they're going to transfer to a 4-year university. So we're open enrollment for all of those possibilities and then some. So that's the first thing I would emphasize. In a way, we are sort of the front door to higher education for all of Texas. And we're proud to be that. We're proud to be that sector that takes any student that wants to further their education. And so I think that's the first thing I would say in terms of the role of our community colleges. The second thing I think that's worth emphasizing is academic degree and workforce education credentials, right? So the role of community colleges is to ensure that we offer excellent quality education opportunities for those students who aspire to transfer to another university or maybe just aspire to achieve an associate degree, and then work, for example, in the nursing industry or in the medical industry in some capacity.
Yeah.
So that all of that is part of what we do, obviously, and it's a big part of what we do. But we're also about workforce development. So many of the courses, many of the credentials that we offer will be workforce education credentials, level one, level two certificates. In other words, these are credentials where a student does not need to stay and complete 60 semester credit hours, which is required for an associate degree. It may be more like 45 semester credit hours to achieve a level one certificate or a level two certificate in automotive technician, for example, or in HVAC training, or something in the healthcare industry. So there are workforce education credentials that are very valuable that lead to, in many cases, high-paying jobs and good, strong economic mobility over the course of a person's career that also are a part of what we do as community colleges. The third area, so again, that second is academic and workforce education credentials. The third, I would say, is important to point out is also around what we do increasingly for dual credit enrollment,
Yeah.
right? So we've seen a large sort of upswing in enrollment over the past decade in particular in dual credit enrollment. Some states refer to it as just dual enrollment. We call it dual credit enrollment here. And that is students who are still in high school, but who are also duly enrolled, not just as a high school student, but also as a student at a community college, taking one or two courses that will count toward their community college experience if they matriculate into a community college or even into a 4 year. So those college credits are transferable usually. So increasingly, we have a strong footprint across the state of Texas in dual credit enrollment. In fact, recent statistics I've seen show that somewhat, a little more than 90% of all dual credit offered in the state of Texas emanates from a community college. So it's either a community college that has faculty at a high school that's offering those dual credit courses, or it's a community college that actually has physical space at their campus, and high school students come on a regular basis to the campus to take dual credit courses on the college campus. It's a mixture of that. Most of it is mostly just our faculty at high schools teaching dual credit courses or college level courses basically. So that's the third area of emphasis that that the role that we play for Texas. It is to ensure that dual credit opportunities are available to our high school students across the state, and that's working out very well, quite frankly.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like community colleges are it's just a dynamic response to, the educational needs of Texas. I mean, anybody
Yes.
can go. It's level one, level two certificates, associate's degrees, just for fun, credits, high
Yep.
school, all sorts of stuff.
Yep.
So I mean, it's not surprising that, like you say, that over the past 10 years, it's become that dual credit stuff has been more popular. I wonder if college four-year university price increases has anything to do with that, high school students wanting to go to a university, but knowing that's going to be very expensive, choosing this route to maybe offset some of that cost.
I think that's true. I think that's part of the rationale for that students would take dual credit courses. It's something that my wife and I emphasized for our kids when they were making their way through high school because it does offset some of the costs. Now, I will say that with regard to our public four-year universities here in Texas, we have outstanding higher education offerings in the state,
Sure.
and so I'm proud. Of course, I work for community colleges. But prior to coming here, Brad, I was deputy commissioner at the coordinating board for academic affairs and workforce education. So essentially, my role at the coordinating board was to work with all sectors of higher education, not just our community colleges. I know the high quality and the excellence that's offered by all sectors, our public universities, Our community colleges, of course, our Texas State Technical College system as well is outstanding, one of the best in the nation, et cetera. So we can our independent colleges. So we should be very proud that we have such great offerings here in the state from various sectors of higher education.
Of
Yeah.
course, absolutely. So, looking at the future of community colleges as we go forward, I know that the state has a long-term higher ed program goal called the Building a Talent Strong Texas,
Mhm.
and talking about workforce alignment and all that stuff. And maybe you touched on that a little bit when you were discussing the level one, level two certificates.
Yeah.
But I'm sort of curious, that's more broadly, how do you see the role of community colleges in educating Texans going forward?
We are, we should be held accountable for helping to meet the state's strategic goals in higher education. And as you say, building a talent strong Texas is the roadmap that the state of Texas has adopted to say, okay, here are the goals that we have for a 15-year period. Build a Talent Strong Texas was actually adopted by the legislature. It was created back in 2015, called 60 by 30 TX at the time, adopted by the legislature, I think formally in 2017, and then revised in 2020 and renamed as Building a Talent Strong Texas. But it is a 15-year strategic plan for higher education success for our state. And it replaced a previous 15-year plan that had been in place called Closing the Gaps, is what the previous plan had been called. And so our job, as it is true for our universities, as it's true for our independent colleges, is to support and achieve the goals of building a talent strong Texas. Now, I won't go into a deep dive about all the goals, but perhaps the top line goal of building a talent strong Texas is completion. In other words, student success. What we want, what we aspire to do here in Texas is to have, if possible, at least 60% of our state's adult population, in other words, adults between the ages of 24 and 64, if you will, that population will have at least 60% having a post-secondary credential. Doesn't have to be an associate degree, doesn't have to be a bachelor's or a graduate level degree. It could be a workforce education credential like a level one or level two cert that gives the holder of that credential economic mobility. We want our credentials to have value,
Yeah.
obviously, and that's what matters so much, right? So I think you know I think that is a big part of what we ought to be doing to support our state's higher education strategic plan. So again, that's our obligation, and we take that very seriously as
Yeah.
helping to achieve. I think right now the latest numbers I saw, maybe we're at about somewhere between 45 and 50% completion of a post-secondary credential for that sort of age population I just mentioned in the state of Texas. So we have a ways to go to try to get to that 60% level by the year 2030, because that's the end. That's right now our end date for the current 15-year strategic plan, which again that we call Building a Talent Strong Texas. So the future of community colleges is built around supporting our strategic plan, but
Yep.
it's also now increasingly around what happened just less than 2 years ago by our legislature, the unanimous passage of House Bill 8. I mean, and I mean unanimous. There was not one no vote against House Bill 8 in its final passage. We had all members, Republican and Democrat alike, at our Texas legislature back in May of 2023 vote yes to pass House Bill 8. And House Bill 8 fundamentally transformed the funding model for our 50 community colleges, the state's portion of funding. Remember, we talked earlier about there are essentially three sources of funding for our community colleges. One is local property taxes, that every college has some authority to be able to have funding from a local taxing district.
Yep.
The second source is tuition and fees. The third source is state revenue, is funding from the legislature.
Yeah.
So House Bill 8 transformed how we're going to allocate the state revenue portion of funding for our community colleges away from a static model, which was based almost entirely on enrollment, and towards a new model, which has just been implemented in the past 12 months, and that is towards outcomes and performance. So that state funding gets distributed now based upon outcomes and performance for each college. It's a radical transformation. We are leading the nation now in terms of how we fund our community colleges. So that, that's the future as well, is to successfully continue to implement this new funding formula while also concurrently supporting the state's higher education goals through building a talent strong Texas.
Yeah, I mean that I do have it on here that I want to talk to you about House Bill 8, so I'm glad you brought it up. I think that's really cool that, and it seems like you guys were behind it, right? And it maybe it's counterintuitive a little bit to the average person outside of government that you would want that you would push for outcomes based funding.
Mhm.
And I mean, what so outcomes and success, how is that measured?
Yeah, so we were absolutely in favor. All 50 community colleges, were fully supportive of the passage of House Bill 8. We had been
It
working
seems like
for.
it makes their jobs a little bit more difficult, which I mean, I'm not saying that's bad, but it seems like, all right, now we really got to perform if we want to get this money.
We do, and
That's
and
great.
we're not. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's right, and I think that should be expected by the taxpayers of Texas. If we're
Yeah.
going to give you funding, we want to see what the outcome looks like.
Yeah.
Uh, Funding previously was based upon, and primarily it was called contact hours, but it equates to enrollment. So the more folks we got into the door of higher education, more funding was provided, and that's okay. That funding model was in place for decades, but it wasn't focused on performance and outcomes. And we felt
Yeah.
like that's okay. Let's go ahead and do funding based upon performance, because we feel confident that we are moving very, very positively in the direction that when students enroll at a community college, and again, keep in mind our mission is varied. Our mission for every community college is to not just support students that want immediate employment upon receiving a credential. We also need to support a large number, still a majority of students who come into a community college not seeking immediate employment, but seeking to complete a set of courses, maybe the core curriculum, maybe 60 semester credit hours, and then transfer into a four-year university and complete a bachelor's degree. So we're not all of our students are about immediate employment, but that's an important piece of we serve a broad array of students in that manner. So I think we were talking about House Bill 8. I got a little off track there in my response to you, but
How's it
um,
acting? How are the outcomes measured?
yeah. So thank you. The outcomes are measured through. So instead of enrollment, now we look at performance and outcomes, and it's the following. It is the conferring of credentials of value. And a credential of value is a term of art that is essentially defined by the coordinating board. So it's not, we don't define that. It is up to our state agency that oversees higher education to look at what is a credential of value. And to do so, I'm not going to go into a lot of the details, but to do so, the basic approach is, all right, let's look at a level 1 certificate in automotive technician. And
Yeah.
let's look at that certificate, the value of that credential over a 3, 5, and 10-year period. And let's take into consideration what the student paid to obtain that credential, but then let's compare it to a student that is just a high school graduate who does not have that credential. And let's look over a 3, 5, and 10-year period at the wage outcomes for those particular, so those two generic individuals, if you will. And if the wage data shows that credential leads to a higher wage average over a 3, 5, and 10-year period, then it is a credential of value, because you're gaining from that credential. You're able to make more money on a year-to-year basis because you obtain that credential than somebody without that credential, than just a typical individual that has a high school diploma. So first is credential of value, as defined again by the coordinating board. The second metric that is fundable is transfer. So the legislature said, all right, for every student that enrolls in a community college and does at least 15 semester credit hours at the community college and then transfers to one of our public four-year universities in Texas, that is a fundable outcome for the community college. You got them 15 semester credit hours. You got them successfully transferred over to a public four-year university here in Texas. That becomes fundable. So that's the second. A credential of value is first. And in fact, credential of value for high demand fields gets a slightly higher payout under this formula because we know we need more STEM focused careers, for example. We need more nurses in
Yeah.
Texas, for example. So the more we do in high demand careers, the more we get paid under the credentials of value fundable outcome. Then there's transfer that I just explained. The third area is dual credit. And what HB8 says is for every student that enrolls and completes 15 semester credit hours of dual credit, then that is a fundable outcome for the college. We've got them 15 semester credit hours. What data shows is that most of those that complete 15 semester credit hours, most of the students will matriculate, usually into the community college where they took that dual credit, but sometimes they'll matriculate. In other words, they'll enroll into a university or something like that.
Yeah.
So 15 semester credit hours usually leads to that student furthering their post-secondary education. That's why we set it at 15 in HB8. So a student does 15 semester credit hours through a community college, that becomes fundable under HB8. And then the last thing just to mention, I know we spent a lot of time on this, but the last thing is that there are weights assigned. So those are the fundable categories: credentials of value, transfer, and dual credit.
Yeah.
But then there are weights assigned for students who are economically disadvantaged, students who are academically disadvantaged, and students who are adult learners. The more we do to confer a credential to students who are economically disadvantaged or who come in that are not quite college ready, but we get them college ready through various dual enrollment courses and so forth. And then adult learners defined as 25 years in age and older. So the more we do in those categories to confer a credential of value, the more funding that comes under this new state formula.
Yeah.
Again, that's a lot of detail, but it's a very different way of funding community colleges, and we are leading the nation. We're the only community colleges in the country that has adopted this type of a form. There's others that do have outcomes-based funding, not quite as innovative as what we're doing here in Texas.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, the workforce alignment part of all of this, I think is really cool because, I mean, I don't know, when I was in just middle school, there was woodwork and stuff like that. And
Right.
like that's really kind of gone by the wayside when it comes to middle and high schools across Texas. Maybe there's in some, they still have those programs, but it seems like there's a resurgence in interest, whether it be, in, conversations with friends or online and communities and education circles, whatever, of getting those I don't know what you'd call it. Uh what is it? What's the word? What's the word I'm looking for? It starts with a V, I think.
Well,
Uh
vocational
yeah,
training or
vocational training. There we
technical
go.
training. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
bringing that back to
Yep,
education. And I know that, community colleges offer that a lot of the times.
we do.
You've
We
talked
do.
about it with mechanics and stuff like that. And I
Yep.
think that's really cool. And with, I'm going to use, Tesla and SpaceX just because they made the news recently
Yeah.
as places where that sort of that training would be really helpful. How do community colleges sort of gauge what's needed in the workforce to
Mhm.
do that workforce alignment?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, House Bill 8 really is about ensuring that we align educational outcomes with the needs of our business and industry across the state. How do we do that? There's a long history of partnerships and collaboration between our 50 community colleges and local and regional business and industry. I mentioned the petrochemical industry down in Corpus Christi, strong partnership with Del Mar College and Coastal Bend College, which are the two colleges in that particular area of South Texas that service, if you will, that Corpus Christi Coastal Bend area. But that's true for all of our 50 community colleges. There's these strong partnerships and collaboration with business and industry to gauge what is needed. In North Texas, Denison, Sherman area, Grayson Community College, Grayson College as they go by, a lot of work happening in advanced manufacturing, a lot of Samsung and other high tech companies that are bringing new jobs to that area, and these are really good jobs, well paying jobs. Grayson College will adjust their workforce education curriculum to train for the needs of that local or regional industry or business. That's the flexibility that we have at our community colleges that makes us so valuable. We can pull together a curriculum if there is an emerging field that suddenly comes up in a particular area. We have the flexibility, we have the know-how, we have the faculty. Often we partner with business and industry so that we use some of their own employees to serve as adjunct faculty members to train students who want to learn more about a particular industry. John Deere, for example, the agricultural company, has a strong relationship with Navarro College in Corsicana,
Yep.
where you go and there's John Deere tractors there, and they're training, and there's a strong collaboration. So these are examples that I could probably give you for all 50 community colleges where
Sure.
they are absolutely in touch with local, and it could be small business owners as well, or it could be larger regional businesses and industries. The community college, they are in touch, and even more so because of HB8 and the funding provided, even more so, these collaborations and partnerships have been reinvigorated over the past couple of years because of the passage of House Bill 8, strengthening those collaborations and partnerships with business and industry. So it's a big part of what we do for our region. Often a small community college, and we have 50 across the state, as I mentioned, often a small community college in Big Spring, Texas, Howard College is an economic engine for that particular area of the state. So they better be in touch with local business and industry needs and be responsive to that, right?
Yeah. So now I'm trying to decide, do I go to Corsicana and dream of driving a tractor, or do I stay here and see if Austin Community College needs someone to teach podcasting? I'm not really
Either are both are great options, Brad. There's no doubt about it.
So I know HB8 was a big deal for y'all in the 88th legislature, but we have the 89th coming up right around the corner at the beginning of 2025. Just
Yeah.
surprisingly, it just catches up, just a few months away. Um, what are y'all's big goals for the 89th legislature?
So I think the biggest one is going to be on the funding side, and I testified recently in front of the House Appropriations Committee, one of their interim hearings, and talked a little bit about this. The first is that Texas budgets for a 2-year cycle. So in 2023, HB8 was passed unanimously, and the legislature, and we are so grateful to our members of the legislature, to state leadership, Governor Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Patrick, Speaker Phelan, have all been strong supporters and advocates of not just House Bill 8, but our community colleges across Texas, and we greatly appreciate that.
Yeah.
What we do is budget for a 2-year cycle, and what we're finding now is we're ending, coming up to another legislative session starting in January, where they're going to start thinking about the budget for the following 2 years. What we're seeing is that community colleges, as a sector, we have produced more outcomes than we budgeted for, than was expected, right? So this is data from the coordinating board. Again, it's not our data, it is from the coordinating board that shows that right now we're going to need another approximately $40 million to be able to pay for the outcomes that are being produced, particularly workforce education credentials and dual credit outcomes.
Yeah.
Those are the two that we're seeing a lot of uptick in enrollment for. So first and foremost for the legislature, we're going to be asking for funding in the supplemental appropriations bill. And that would be this additional 40, coordinating board may revise that number before the start of session, but right now $40 million to pay for the outcomes that we have produced in the current 2-year budget cycle.
So y'all are just
And
doing too good.
well, we love that. Yes, you
Yeah.
words that I want to quote you on, and absolutely, we're doing too good, but that's what the state wants. We want too good means we're getting credentials of value into the hands of students who are then using that economic mobility to keep great momentum in our economy here in Texas. We've been outpacing national economy on job growth, on GDP growth, et cetera. We want to keep that momentum going. One way to do it is to make sure that our workforce is trained for the jobs of today
Yeah.
and anticipating the jobs of tomorrow as well. We do a lot of that at our community colleges as well. So I think all of that, I think all of that is particularly important. We're also going to be, of course, asking for funding for the coming 2-year period. That'll be a coordinating board number. They're still assessing what the recommendation will be to the legislature as to what funding should be provided to our community colleges, again, from state revenue for the coming 2-year period. So that's a separate ask. So one is supplemental to pay for what we've done now. One is to pay for, have the money for the outcomes that we'll produce in the next 2 years. The third thing I'll mention very briefly is when we wrote HB8, we didn't think about the fact that many of our community college students, they don't just transfer to one of our publicly funded four-year universities like A&M San Antonio, or I'm sorry, UT San Antonio or A&M Commerce,
Yeah.
they transfer in many instances to one of our independent colleges. McClellan College in Waco has a very strong transfer history between their students and Baylor University right there in Waco.
Yeah.
But right now, when students transfer from McClellan to Baylor, that's not considered a fundable outcome because Baylor is not a public four-year university. It's a private university.
Yeah.
So we've talked to the legislature, and again, we'll have to see if the legislature agrees once we get into session, is whether we can add the 41 or so independent colleges like Baylor, Rice, SMU, TCU, et cetera, whether we can add our independent colleges into that transfer fundable outcome, so that when a student transfers not just to a public four-year, but to a private independent four-year university, that counts as a transfer, as a fundable outcome for the community college. We're hoping to add that to HB8, and I think so far, certainly the independent colleges are in favor of that as well. We'll see if the legislature agrees, but that's another
Yeah.
priority.
Well,
Yeah,
you had, like you said, you had unanimous support last time on HB8, so I wouldn't be surprised if you got it on that, and it seems to make sense. So,
it does. I think
I
so.
for sure, I wish you the best of luck for that. Well, Ray Martinez, President and CEO of the Texas Association of Community Colleges, I appreciate you taking the time. Is there a website or social media that you wanted to plug?
Well, our website for TAC is tacc.org. All of our information is there. My contact information is there. Brad, you're so kind to let me take a deep dive at times into maybe more detail than you would want. But HB8 is
Wow.
truly exciting for us. We're so proud to be a unified sector, speaking with one voice and saying thank you to the legislature. Thank you to the people of Texas for supporting our community colleges. And we're going to keep working to earn that support. So thank you, Brad.
Well, Ray, thank you so much. I appreciate it, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, take care.